Welcome to Mpowered Living. I'm your host, Sheu. Each week on this show, we have conversations that help us create greater alignment between who we are, what we value, and how we live. Through honest stories, fresh perspectives, and practical insights, we'll explore the choices that shape a meaningful life at work, at home, and in the relationships that matter most. Because success should support the life you want, not pull you away from it. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. You're going to love this conversation. My guest today is Danny Southwick. Danny is a professional athlete, a behavioral scientist, and a researcher who studies human performance, motivation, and talent. Most of us have asked some version of this question: do I have what it takes? But what if that's the wrong question altogether? In this conversation, Danny challenges some of our biggest assumptions about talent, potential, and why some people continue to grow while others stay stuck. We explore what really shapes performance, what keeps us moving forward through setbacks, and how the stories we tell ourselves influence the lives we ultimately create. Whether you're trying to become a better leader, a better parent, a better athlete, a better entrepreneur, or simply a better version of yourself, this episode will challenge the way you think about growth and what's actually possible for you. Let's dive in. Danny, welcome to the show. I am so excited about our conversation today.
Me too. It'll be fun.
All right, let's dive in. What are some of the biggest lies that people believe that causes them to stop growing?
Oh, that's really a great question. The one that occurs to me immediately, and this is because this is like the center of my research. I believe that we kind of live in this illusion that talent is this really measurable, identifiable thing that can either advance us or limit us. The available evidence about talent is quite limited. And so when someone says so-and-so is talented, I mean, I'm going to ask you, how do you know when someone's talented, Anne?
They do something really well.
Okay. And then how do you define talent? I know I'm kind of flipping this on you, but
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I think talent is often seen as like you're born with a gift.
Right. So I think a lot of people define it that way. We've done lots of research on this specific question. How do you define talent? And there's kind of like two camps. Well, there's really three camps. One camp defines talent as kind of how the dictionary defines it, which is like it's like this innate gift. And historically, just what you said, I think that's how people have thought about it. Increasingly, people are starting to think of talent as, well, human resource management, for example, is like that term is starting to give way to talent management. I don't know if you've noticed this, and some of the businesses that you've worked with or around, that people now have talent management departments. And so now when we think about talent, we're thinking about a person or about just ability in general, not necessarily like an innate gift. And then there's this other group that thinks of talent as being entirely synonymous with like skill. And that would be maybe people that have heard a lot of discussion about growth mindsets, and we probably will talk about that at some point today. But going back to like your question, many people think of talent, and the classic definition of talent is that it is this innate ability. And is it problematic that like in organizations, we talk about talent all the time? In school, we have gifted and talented programs. America's Got Talent. The word talent is everywhere. And kind of what's the connotation of that? What are we kind of implying by referring to ability as talent all the time? It's a question I'm really interested in. But my current like working theory is that talent is what we label, and I have some data to back this up, but what we label differences in performance as when we can't explain it through effort. So if I say Jim and Joe are both learning how to play the violin, and Jim, despite the fact that they both worked for equal amounts of time, Jim learned faster than Joe. Why is that the case? We've asked this question to lots of people. And by far the most dominant answer is, well, Jim's more talented than Joe, which is a similar thing that you said. You actually said that someone is really good at something, which that's another way that people infer talent. The problem with that is there's lots of reasons why one person can be better than someone, or certainly why someone can learn faster or start out quicker. It could be they have a different coach, they have a different background, they have a different mindset, they're sleeping better. Like, there's a million reasons why one person can perform better than someone else at one point. But when we don't know what all of those reasons are, what do we label it as? Oh, the difference is talent. And the take-home message is I don't have what it takes, or I do have what it takes. But the problem, even when you have a talent, belief confidently, and so here's where this discussion of mindset comes in. So Carol Dweck is like, I don't know, she's one of my heroes for sure, and I think lots of psychologists' heroes. But her research basically showed that even if you think you are talented, so forget the like the worst case, which is like I don't think I have any ability. Even if you do think you have ability, what happens is that positive belief turns out to be very fragile.
Mm.
Because the second that you fail, now what do you think? Well, maybe I don't have what it takes. And it turns out, if you look at like cognitive psychology and performance science, the best data we have that tells us what makes someone great is how much practice they do, a very specific type of practice called deliberate practice, how much of that they do for an extended period of time. That's a far better predictor than anything we might label as talent. And so I think most of us, I know certainly I did as a, before I was we'll probably get into this, but before I was a scientist, a behavioral scientist, athlete and professional athlete, we live in a world where talent is discussed. It's like, it's this real thing. And yet, very different from other things in science, we very rarely measure it directly. We measure it honestly by saying, well, once everything else has been measured, well, what's left? Well, that must be talent. So I'm starting to think that it's this bias that we naturally kind of lean towards these answers. You want to say, well, why is someone good? Well, they must have that it factor. My kids have been obsessed with Michael Jackson lately. I don't know if have you watched any of the movie? Have you seen the movie that came out recently?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so there's this movie. It's like a box office smash hit about Michael Jackson, and just there's lots of things about Michael Jackson probably that I wouldn't want my kids to spend too much time thinking about. But one thing I'm fine for sure is the kind of how he developed his skills and his abilities. But most people, when they see him, they just say he is blessed with some God-given, just incredible talent. And if you kind of read his biography, if you watch the biopic, which is I think a really interesting movie, it's like it wasn't that he was just better than his brothers. He happened to be the youngest brother, which that makes a big difference because he's learning from his older brothers. They had already mastered, and his dad had already learned kind of how to do a lot of the things that help people develop their skills. So he was like the youngest brother. He was also obsessed with what he did. He, like, compared to his brothers who were kind of more into girls, he was the one that was writing music and thinking about these things all the time. And so what we often think about is talent is this underlying obsession and process that takes thousands and thousands and thousands of hours that no one ever sees. And then when someone finally does, you say, oh my gosh, this person is different. And so I think, to me, that's at least the lie or the misperception that I'm most interested in. I'm not saying that talent doesn't exist, or I don't think you could prove something like that. But I will say, I think we really over-index on the term, and we really think that it's controlling a lot more than the available evidence suggests.
And
So
why do you think that is? Like, how did we get to a world where we over-index on talent? Like, what is causing that? Is it a message from society? Is it from our parents? Is it?
I don't know if it's a natural human bias. I really don't.
Yeah.
We certainly live in a society. So I will say this. So like some cultures, like China and so like Eastern cultures, do not focus as much on like gifted and talented programs as we do in the United States. And so somewhere embedded in it's probably a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Around the 1900s, certainly by 1920, psychologists, they started developing IQ tests. A guy named Alfred Binet developed the test, but he actually thought of intelligence as something that you could change. But then other researchers at Stanford and then eventually the United States military during World War II, they started doing all of this like intelligence testing, and they developed this kind of idea that the best performers, were the people that were kind of naturally gifted. And now we just kind of buy that story before we look deeper into it. I think there's a lot to question about that kind of narrative.
And if somebody is listening and they're like, okay, I hear that, I'm guilty of that, what is the process to unravel that belief system?
What a good question. Oh, I'll tell you what Carol Dweck will tell, and we should talk about who she is. But she has some ideas. What worked for me. So let me just tell you my own story. So I was this athlete, and I had lot of scholarships coming out of high school to big universities. I went to college and kind of like really underperformed and was like the opposite of like a gritty, persevering person. I could transfer all of these different schools. And then eventually like I became very inspired by some books that I was reading and then really applied myself. And then I get offered a contract to play with the Oakland Raiders in the NFL. And the scout that saw me practice and which ultimately led to me getting an opportunity, his name was George Karras. And before I was getting ready to go to the Raiders mini camp, he said, Danny, look, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen the best, I've seen the worst. He's like, trust me, you have the talent to play in the NFL. So I was like, this is wonderful. And then I show up to Raiders camp and I sit with one of the coaches there. And it's our first conversation. And he's like, Danny, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen the best, I've seen the worst. He's like, trust me, you don't have the talent.
Mm.
Like, he's very mixed messages, right? And that was for me the first time that I kind of saw behind the curtain of the Wizard of Oz. Like, wait, what's really going on here? Because these people are acting certain that one person that I had talent, they can see it, they've been doing it for 30 years. Other person, same story, but I didn't. And I read this book called The Talent Code, which I recommend to all of your readers. It was written about a decade and a half ago by a guy named Daniel Coyle. And in the book, he does this kind of informal study where he goes and looks at what he calls talent hotbeds. And these are places where there's like, statistically speaking, like an improbable amount of world-class people come from these places. So if I remember, I think it was like a tennis club in Russia had more top 20 women's players than all of the United States combined, or a quarterback coach in California had all of these great players, or this like Korean, like K-pop dance trainer, I think had more, I can't remember all the specific, but basically it turns out that exceptional performers aren't randomly distributed in the population. And by the way, that would be the story that talent would tell. It's like, oh, if talent's just like any other genetic thing, we'd expect to see it kind of pop up evenly. But it turns out there are very specific areas where the best tend to come from. And I mean, you can see this historically for like the best artists were in a very specific time in a very specific place during hundreds of years ago in Italy, right? So and the same thing's true with pop music or with computer people that are doing lots of computer innovations. Like there's a reason why it happens in the Bay Area, right, or around Menlo, and so what he goes deeper. He basically is like, look, this is unusual, and so he starts reading the science, and then he talks about a guy named Anders Ericsson, who I actually later in my research career spent a lot of time with, and they talk about, well, what's the history of people that have been high performers and how, and all of Ericsson's work is like they don't develop just by having some freakish talent. They have do all of this with practice. And then Cole goes a step deeper and he's like, well, there's something behind this. And then he talks to neuroscientists and he basically makes the case that when people become experts, their brain is basically changing. And so you can look at people's brains before they do practice and after they do practice. And there's different patterns of what's called myelination, which is this like a fatty like sheath around like a neuron circuitry that when you practice it changes. And so for me, you said, well, how did I change from having this disempowering belief to, oh my gosh, like more is possible and I think it's possible, was understanding what's really going on. Like not just taking everyone's word for it. Oh, trust me, talent exists, but no, what's the science behind it? And now 15 years into this thing, so I was trying to, I've transitioned primarily from a, athlete to a scientist now. Like the story for science is, and some people won't like this, but it's, to me, incredibly weak compared to the very robust evidence we have supporting the developmental story that human beings are nothing if not malleable, nothing if not changeable. We can get better. And so knowing that for me, that's how beliefs change. Is like beliefs change from evidence, right? It's why juries need evidence to make a decision. And so when I got all this evidence, I was like, oh my gosh, this story I've learned my whole life isn't necessarily true.
If somebody is realizing that the story is not true, but they still feel stuck, what would you assume is maybe happening beneath the surface?
I mean, I feel that way. I think we all feel that way. I mentioned Carol Dweck's name a few times, so I'll just say who she is. So Carol Dweck's this wonderful scientist at Stanford who studied who studies mindsets, and mindsets, the way the psychologists, many of them currently define mindsets, is like, it's like a belief that you have. And her research has been on whether people believe that ability is changeable. This is called a growth mindset. I believe I can get better, versus a fixed mindset. And for decades, she's done lots of research showing that having that belief that your ability is changeable is really important. Leads to all of these important outcomes like persistence and being able to process and focus, all these really important things. But when I was speaking with her, she told me, she goes, Danny, look, I developed the term growth mindset, and I still sometimes fall into these fixed mindset traps. Sometimes I can get triggered. And I think whether we really believe it, like consciously, our subconscious plays a big role, and lots of things can influence our subconscious, right? So like the environment you're in, even if you don't, like for me, like my belief, I'm not saying talent couldn't exist. And certainly there are some things that could qualify as talent. Like we just saw then the NBA finals was a guy named Victor Wembanyama, who's 7'4" tall. Like he's different than me. There's like, I get it. Like talent in some contexts, if you want to define height as talent, it for sure exists. In other contexts, it might exist, even if our measures aren't great for it yet. But even though I really am like the biggest talent skeptic maybe in the world, or like one of them, I still can get locked into things like, oh, something to work on. Maybe I don't have what it takes, just like Carol. And so Carol's advice is to practice mindfulness. I have a different strategy, and we probably both agree with each other's strategies, but her strategy is basically this mindful approach in which you kind of practice, it's called self-distancing. So we get caught in our thoughts a lot of times, and we think that we believe our thoughts, right? Because of course, like they're in my head. I trust them. And when you are practice mindfulness, have you ever practiced mindfulness? Like, it's like you kind of observe what's going on. And she says, well, give your as you observe your fixed mindset thoughts, give that person a name. And so it might be fixed mindset Bill, or fixed mindset Susie, or whatever it is. And you try to understand why you're having those thoughts. Well, maybe I just feel like I'm not believing in my ability to get something done because maybe my brain's trying to protect myself. Maybe it's unsure. And Carol's advice is to do, again, it reminds me so much of Eastern, meditation. It's like, be gentle with yourself. Don't try to force, just have a growth mindset. She'll say, hey, I understand why you might feel that way. Again, talking to yourself, but let's just try to do, let's try to see what we can learn here. Let's go a little further. Let's see how we can develop, and appreciating that part of yourself, but not necessarily feeling like it's necessarily real, or even that you have to persuade yourself that it's false. So just noticing that it's there, recognizing that voice inside that tells you can't do it, and being okay with that, and being willing to work with it, and saying, okay, let's try something else. Let's being persuasive and gentle, and trying to just do the next step. What's the next small thing you can do? My advice is related. And that is, I think the best way that you can get yourself out of a negative thinking loop is honestly not by thinking. In fact, I think that you can spin your wheels a lot. That's what rumination is, right? You're thinking, and how can I do this? And sometimes you start thinking about thinking, and how come I can't be positive? The biggest thing that changes our identity, there's two things that really change our identity. But one of them, you have control over both, but there's one that you absolutely have control over. And that is, what are you doing? So you say, well, I don't know if I can start a business. Like, and you've started a business. What would be your advice to someone who said, I don't know if I could start a business? What would you tell them? What would you tell somebody?
You don't know if you don't try.
You don't know if you don't try. Yeah, you got to get out there, got to do something. I had someone the other day talking about a podcast, and there's this speaking agency I work with is encouraging us all to start a podcast. And someone asked that question, well, how do you start? And it seems like there's so many things you have to do. And this person who's kind of an expert that's had launched all these big podcasts said, well, my advice is just start, just do something.
Yeah.
What happens is once you get X number of episodes, once you sell your first product, once you lose your first 1 or 2 pounds, you start to see that I moved from, maybe I didn't get from A to Z, but I got from A to B. I got it. There's little progress. Have as little progress as possible. Can I get from B to C? And then you start stacking those on top of yourself. And you say, hey, I am not this static person that can't change. I actually and dynamic and there's who knows what I'm capable of, but I won't know, like you said, if I don't try. And so I think we get stuck so often thinking we have to feel great about I have to feel confident. I think personally, I think confidence is overrated. What do you think? I mean, we sit around trying to pump ourselves up. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. And our brain's going, no, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. Well, why if we just stop like having that conversation and just went out and tried, like you suggested? I think we'd
Yeah.
prove a lot of things. I think we'd prove a lot of things. These stories that we tell ourselves wrong, just by our own experience.
Yeah. One of my mentors, Dan Sullivan, he's the founder of Strategic Coach, and he talks about how confidence is actually the result of making the commitment and doing the thing, and then it gives you courage, and then that is actually what generates the confidence. And so people are waiting for the confidence to get started, but no, it's actually the commitment, and then you do it, and then that is what creates the confidence.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't even know if is, in business, we talk about leading indicators and lagging indicators, and like all of your entrepreneur listeners will understand that term. But I'm not sure if confidence is as much of a leading indicator as it is a lagging one. I mean, we think, oh yeah, every time I perform well, I have confidence. Therefore, I have to have confidence. Like, well, you might perform really well because you like are prepared, and then you start performing, and then you develop confidence. And I do think confidence can unlock things. I mean, I do think confidence is, given the option of being confident or not confident, I choose being confident. But I think we wait on so much. I have to feel confident. And maybe a more important emotion is hope.
Mm,
This is possible for myself. I believe that something can change here. I don't have to know if it's going to happen tomorrow, but I believe it can happen eventually. And because of that, I'm going to keep pressing forward.
beautiful. So, with your perspective about talent, talk to me about how you reconcile the fact that people are different, and there are certain things that you do that would energize you and that would deplete me, and that there are people that are just better. So how do you reconcile, like, people have some unique gifts?
Right. So look, and how we want to define the term gift is an interesting discussion and that, but is no question that there are individual differences. And that would be the term that psychologists would use. There are individual differences. And as you alluded to, those individual differences might be in someone's starting ability. That's like the classic definition of talent, or at least one of them. But maybe just as common, or at least potentially even more common, is maybe someone really feels energized by a particular activity. They love it. They do art. And my daughter told me that was Michael Jackson thing. The reason I brought up that Michael Jackson was in my brain is because, oh my gosh, all that's been going on in my home for the last month is Michael Jackson music and dances and dad, look at this moonwalk. She's totally like filled up by that. My son, not so much. He's like, let me go throw the ball or play this, video game, baseball on my, PlayStation or whatever. We have different things that we like to do. And I don't think we should ignore that. Like if you like to do something, that's a signal. Am I convinced that you have more natural capacity just because you like to do something? I'm not necessarily. There are so many factors that can influence whether or not someone is better than another person. It might be interest, it might be coaching, it might be these things. And so just because people are different, just because someone's better than you or learns faster than you or whatever, has a different learning curve, or like all learning is non-linear, right? It's like this, right? Think about being an entrepreneur. It's like, oh boy, that didn't work. Oh, now I figured it out. Oh no, here's another thing. And so I want people, when people see that, they think like, oh my gosh, I'm fundamentally different from this person. Therefore I can't do it. They believe that lie, to go back to your first question. But that doesn't mean that we're all the same. It doesn't mean that we don't have strengths. It just means that we ought to be careful about how we interpret them. So yeah, I have strengths and I have weaknesses, and my mentor in graduate school, Angela Duckworth, who I love, was always used to say, race your strengths. Race your strengths. She said, work on your weaknesses, race your strengths.
Mm,
It doesn't, you can believe that your strengths came from some like innate giftedness, if you want to, but I think that would be a kind of a less optimal way to look at it. But understanding that you have strengths, that maybe someone's an extrovert, or maybe someone really likes to work with numbers, or someone's very creative or very funny. Like if that's you, double down on that, and let that emerge see where that takes you. From that, we shouldn't take it from the limiting view, which is, so I think talent is, it can be empowering if you think you have it, but inevitably you're going to face adversity. And
Yeah.
that adversity comes if you view the world through a lens of talent, then you start wondering if you have it or not. That's why I'm so cautious about the term, because are you really not capable of doing it? Or is it just maybe you're not interested in it? Or maybe you haven't had the right opportunity or the right strategy. And I think that explains at least as many individual differences as something that's like genetic and unchangeable.
How would you recommend that we protect ourselves from compliments affecting our mindset around talent?
Well, for me, maybe some of the more harmful moments were when I was having a lot of success. That's where it became very easy to buy into it. It's
Hmm.
easier to accept a growth mindset or to be skeptical of the idea of talent when it gives you hope to do so. Because,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, maybe it's not talent. Oh, that feels like a good belief. Maybe let's try that out. But when you are convinced that you are the end all be all, then it's easier to think, oh, I'm just special or I'm just different. And so to protect against that, I think probably a handful of things, but one would be ask people to give you real honest feedback. There's a guy named Ray Dalio, run that hedge fund. He's like, I think private equity guy or something. I might be messing that up. But one very successful multi billionaire, and he in his company, which I think he stepped away from recently, but he had this term which is like he wants people to be like radically honest with one another. And when you are honest, you respect people's strengths, and that's great. But you're also it's like okay, like I could have gotten better at something, and sometimes when we feel like we're doing really well, we can insulate ourselves from that honesty because we're powerful,
Hmm.
and we can have people around us that help us feel really good. But feeling really good is not the same thing as preparing yourself to grow. And so sometimes that I just want someone that tells me that I'm capable and someone that supports me and builds up my self-esteem. Like that can be a real dead end. And committing yourself to saying, hey, like I know that there's always something I can do to get better. There's always another level. What is that level? So again, going back to Angela Duckworth, who I've learned again so much from. After every speech, she says, "What's one thing I could do better?"
Mm.
And as a graduate student, I was like, "Wow, I mean, you did so great. I love the intro." She said, "No, no, what?" Because she's confident, she's confident. She doesn't need that. She goes, "What's one thing I could do better?" Well, your energy on that transition wasn't great. Awesome, thank you. And that's a very different approach, isn't it? Oh, that's so good. Oh, yes, I totally. And that when you get there, I think that's like the ultimate zen of like growth. It's like, oh, like I love getting feedback about how I can improve, even if it means that maybe I'm not perfect right now, because I'm so convinced that I can get better. And being obsessed with that process of like, how do I improve is such a better question than how good am I?
Yeah.
Good am I? It's like this is one moment in time. And when we ask how good am I, what we're really asking is like we usually want someone to support us. Oh, you're good enough. You have what it takes. And I think that's important to feel like that. But more frequently, much more frequently, how can I improve? How can I get better? Because how you are today is irrelevant. What are you going to be like 12 months from now? And the
Yeah.
more we're committed to that process, the more resilient we're going to be when things go bad. We don't see ourselves as a finished product.
Yeah. What about on the flip side, the language that we should be using with our kids and people on our teams and our friends and family that helps reinforce a positive mindset or positive thinking around talent and not by telling them, oh, you're so talented. Like if we know that that is hurting their long term development, what's the language that we should be using instead?
So I really think it's okay to tell people when you feel like they've done a really nice job. You're a great student. I think that's okay. Now, Carol and some of mindset researchers might not like that sort of like summative assessment. You're a good student because it can have fixed mindset connotations. But I actually think it's important in life that we feel like, yeah, hey, my son he plays quarterback now. And before he's going to the game, hey son, you're prepared. Like you're a good player. You can do this. That's important for him to understand in the moment. But I make sure when I give him those compliments, man, son, you're throwing the ball so well right now. And then I'll go, why do you think that is? And he knows the drill by now because I practiced that. He says, yeah, well, you certainly had to work on it. I remember 3 weeks ago and it wasn't going like this, you know? And as long as this term in psychology is called attribution.
Mhm.
What do we attribute things to? And it's basically, well, why did you succeed? Why did you fail? Why did this person break up with you? Why do things happen? And it turns out that our attributions are our mental models of the world. And so you ask people those questions, they start to tell you their what are called um, kind of their like implicit theories. They don't even recognize they have these theories about life. But we say this is why this happened. And if you can work directly on that, say, well, why were you successful? It's because I practiced. You bet it was. Okay, now that connection being, I'm not just good. I'm not just, oh, you're great, and leaving it to chance as to how what attribution is being. No, I'm good because I've done the work. But again, I try to focus less on how good you are and more on where you're going. It's a much better question.
Yeah. Okay, so along those lines, can you talk a little bit about your motivation formula? Because I think when I heard you share this, when I heard you speak, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. So I would love for you to kind of just share as much as.
I would love to claim credit for the expectancy value theory of motivation. Unfortunately, like psychologists 100 years before me, like figured this out. But it is extremely useful, and I agree. Like it explains everything. And it's basically this: it's if you want to know how motivated someone is, like your children or yourself or whoever, you have to know really two things. And we could break it down into more if we wanted to get really granular about it. But really, two things are really important. And one is how valuable is something to someone. So like it doesn't take a genius to know that we're more motivated to do something for a lot of money than for a little money, right? Like we apply to the jobs that are going to pay us well. Like that's one form of value. But there's other forms of values too. Like we like the jobs that are fun to do. We like the jobs that are going to give us status. We like the jobs that are close to a city we want to live in. Like there's different forms of value, but emotionally we kind of calculate that into one amalgamation of like, this is what value is to me. This is what this feels like. But there's another component that really matters, and that is expectancy, the belief that something is possible. Okay. So when I talk to people about grit, like if I give a talk on grit, I say really there's two things that matter. It's hope times purpose equals grit. And what I'm trying to say is it's expectancy times value, purpose being that sense of value. I feel this great deal of purpose, or there's a real reason why I'm doing this. And then the hope part or the expectancy part is I feel like it's possible. And I'm not a math major, but even I know that anything multiplied by zero is zero, right? I can think someone could say, I'll give you $1 billion, and all you have to do is leap across the Grand Canyon. And I'm gonna go, you know what? Not motivated, not motivated at all, even though you gave me $1 billion to do it, because the other part of it was missing. Conversely, you can something that's very easy to do. Go to go outside your backyard. If it's easy for me to do, take me 30 seconds. I'm going to give you $1. It's like, no, I'm having a conversation with Anne right now. So that's not meaningful enough for me to want to do that. And I don't like framing this just in terms of money, because it's really not only about money, but it's just an easy metaphor to help us kind of see how both of these things work in turn. And so you need both. You need to be able to answer to yourself kind of two questions: the whether and the why. Whether or not I can do it. Do I believe this is possible for me? And why am I doing it? And that for leaders, that's so important, because your people that you're leading might be lacking in one or both of these things. But until you ask them questions like, why is this task so hard? They might say, well, I mean, it's miserable to do this. Like no one wants to do this. And so the value is very low. Or your kids might be saying that, I don't want to go to practice because, oh my gosh, this coach is like, it's like so boring and he always yells at me. Okay, that's a value problem. The other might be true, which is, well, why didn't you want to go to practice? Or why are you having problems with this particular project? Well, it's just so hard. I just don't feel capable of doing it. Like, and that one might take longer to get to, because sometimes we feel insecure about letting people know that. And
Mhm.
sometimes, by the way, sometimes people will mask whether or a hope problem, like a whether or not they can do it problem, and say it's a value problem. Like they really don't think that they're good at something. They don't think they're talented. You say, well, why don't you want to go do this? Well,
Mm,
this sucks. This thing, I hate this. Like, okay, but if a week ago before this person said you weren't very good, you didn't hate it. So I mean, we need both. And if we can understand that, we can start to become a master of our own motivation psychology and move towards really helping other people unlock their own motivation as well.
Okay, so if somebody's hearing this motivation formula and they are wanting to apply it to their team or to their kids, what are the questions that you would encourage them to think about to start with?
Well, I would encourage people to really try to find out what people want to do first. You can't always do it. You can't always do that, but you've got to find a way to persuade people to want to be in it. If they're not, doesn't matter how much they believe they can, it's going to fall on deaf ears. And human beings, we want to feel like we are choosing our own path. In fact, there's this psychological phenomenon known as reactance, which is even if I don't dislike something, the second that you kind of tell me that I have to do something or that I can't do something, it's like now I want to do the opposite of what you told me because it's so important for us to feel like we're in control. And
Yeah.
so right now, some of my colleagues and I are working on this leadership framework, this supportive and demanding leadership framework, which we spoke about a little bit a few months ago, and it's like great leaders tend to do both of these things. They support the people they're leading, but they have high expectations. They demand a lot from them. But that support part, like you can't demand anything until people feel supported. And one of the ways we know people feel supported, we call it internal motivation support. And that is, I care about your interests and I care about what's important to you. Well, so and so doesn't do this project. Well, do they hate this project at work, or so and so is having a hard time making any progress on this thing? Well, have they connected that to their value system, or do they just see this as something you're asking them to do that's completely divorced from any of their own goals? And so when leaders can help people see, hey, like I know this is challenging work, but actually this is the thing that is going to help you become a great leader later, or this is going to help you be able, when the next promotion comes around, that's going to be what I'm looking for. Now you've transformed the meaning of that. And it's actually called goal fusion. There's some researchers now studying this thing called goal fusion, which is, I hate this lower goal, but you've now reframed this lower goal, whatever it is, taking out the trash, doing the paperwork, whatever, as actually fulfilling this higher level goal. And so now when I'm doing this lower level goal, I see myself as no, I'm actually doing the thing that's going to help me have the career I want to have. Oh, that feels good. There's this story. I can't remember if I said it. Sorry, this is kind of. I don't even. It might even be mythical, but there's this story of John F. Kennedy walking NASA after hours when they were racing to the moon. The United States and Russia were kind of, or USSR, I guess, were having this race so you could get to the moon, and the United States had this goal of like getting to the moon within a decade. Now, like historical reports of that time period, so people at NASA were incredibly motivated, and part of it was how they were framing things. And so Kennedy is walking at a space station, I guess, would be in Houston, right? And he talks to a janitor who's like sweeping after hours, and he goes, "Why are you here so late? Like it's like well past time. Shouldn't you be home? Why are you sweeping up the floor?" And he goes, "Mr. President, I'm not sweeping up floors. I'm helping put a man on the moon." That's goal fusion, right? If your kids feel like, hey, like I'm not doing homework, I'm preparing myself to change the world to whatever, I want to be an entrepreneur, or I'm not just going to practice. I'm preparing myself to make the varsity team or get a college scholarship or live my dream of something. Now that psychologically changes things. I think if leaders can get there, that's the biggest place they can frame things. The other part about mindset, that to me is more of like, that's more of the thing that has to be constant. You have to constantly watch that. And some organizations really frame, or families really frame life around who's talented and who's not. And I'd say you need to just entirely change the types of words that you use and the ways that you talk about success. But that to me is kind of a broader thing. The more direct thing is you have to make sure someone wants it in the first place. So I think that would be the order of operations for me, is like purpose first, then expectancy, but both are important, and that could flip.
That's great. I love that. And, we see that in our work with our couples because we help them craft a decade dream, so a 10-year goal. So they're able to do what you call goal fusion with that 10-year goal. They know what success looks like 10 years out. And so they can do the hard thing right now because they know it helps them get to that 10-year goal.
Right. Right. And it's really becomes fusion when you start to see that them as one and the same. Like I'm
Mhm.
not just cleaning my house, or I'm not just saving money. I'm what I'm doing is I'm preparing for financial freedom for my family. Like it's just that subtle reframe that changes the emotional experience. And no matter how disciplined we are, we are driven by emotions. And in fact, what makes us disciplined in many cases is that we learned how to align our emotions in one way or another with what serves our best interest in the long run. So I think that's awesome, right? Have that long term vision, and now you start to see your daily activities very differently.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, you mentioned grit earlier. I would love to just ask you, how does somebody walk this line between quitting too soon and holding on too long? Because I think it's like this balance that like
Totally.
how do I know when am I being gritty and when am I just holding on to something that I've outgrown something or when am I just being stubborn, right? Like how do we know what that line is?
Really, really good question. Yeah, right. There's these two terms. One is like perseverance, and that's like a good thing. Everyone wants to persevere. There's another word called perseveration, or like yeah, to perseverate, and that means like to persist too long. Perseveration, I think, happens when you're overly committed to a mid-level goal. And what I mean by that is you have some non-negotiables, like we all do. And if you don't like and is it a course that you have as a project, whatever, listen more about Anne's because what you're doing is exactly what we'd encourage someone to do. To figure out what's important to you in the long run. What happens is we think about like goals. In our mental model, we have like this hierarchy of goals, at least many of us do, where you kind of have like, here's what I have to do today. And like maybe here's where I want to be 6 months from now or a year from now. And then here's like my life mission or what I want to do a decade from now or something like this. If you think of like a pyramid, like you would each level up you go to like your top level goal, it's really you get there by asking yourself why. And the further, if but when you say, okay, well, why do I want to do this? Why do I want to do this? Why do I do this? Well, because I imagine when you're working with clients or people that you're training, they get to some like it's almost like an abstract goal. I want to change the world or make the world a better place or have my kids live in peace and harmony. Like it's these very like universal principles that we are all like kind of these mushy things in our hearts that they're like we're never going to give up on those goals.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that sometimes we see these mid-level goals as non-negotiables.
Mm.
Let me give you an example. I love sports. In fact, I'm 44 years old. Can you believe I'm still playing arena football? I mean, what am I doing? Like, geez, like it's
It's
like
amazing.
question my life decisions. It's amazing. It's also like why, but also I love it. I love it. And I guess I have time during the summers, and so it fits with my kind of like my lifelong pursuit of like research but for me, growing up, my whole identity was sports. Like that's how I wanted to be, right? It's like, and I saw within that, I saw possibility and I saw meaning. And eventually I was playing because I wanted to understand what was possible for myself. Like, is it possible for me to go from like a backup Division III quarterback to signing an NFL contract? And it was possible. Is it possible for me to like play until I'm 45 years old? Well, I'm 44 now. Maybe I'll play next year. Hopefully, the Raiders cut me, and then I started playing arena football, and I hoped that I would play well enough to or whatever, have an opportunity to get signed. Someone signed me again in the NFL. Like that was initially why I was doing it, and then I get drawn into like psychology. And what am I studying in psychology? I'm studying human performance. I'm studying what's possible. I'm studying the same questions I had about talent and all these things. And I realized that my top level goal all along was I'm interested in understanding and in some ways showing what's possible. I'm fascinated by that. And I'm never going to give up on it. We can do this in 40 years. I'm going to be doing the same thing. I promise you. But when I was 25, it definitely looked like trying to show what's possible as an athlete. Now that 20 years later, almost, I'm 44, it looks a lot more like, yeah, I moonlight as a quarterback on arena football, but I spend the by far lion's share of my time trying to pursue that goal of what's possible in my professional career as a behavioral scientist, as a researcher, and then also with my kids and my daughter Liv. You want to sing and dance like Michael Jackson? Let's help you do it. Like I have different ways to reach that goal. But let's say that wasn't my approach, and let's say that I was like, no, my top level goal really is just to make it to the NFL. I want to win a Super Bowl. Now I'm 44 years old. The odds of that happening are incredibly small. Maybe someone will do it one day, Some very unlikely to be me. Tom Brady did win a Super Bowl at 44, but he was in a very different position. I'm saying it's very unlikely it's one of my shoes, right? Playing arena football is going to. So if that was the case, if my only goal was like, I want to win a Super Bowl, and I just kept on doing this, I'm going to start to have like a sad and lonely, eventually like hopeless life because I'm fighting for this business that just isn't working. I'm not like, I had this idea. I was sure about it. Entrepreneurs can relate to this, right? So I was sure about it. Oh no, it's going to work. And the market tells you a different story. And you say, no, I'm going to risk more money. And then we get into what's called the sunk cost fallacy, which is like, I've already invested $1 million. I can't give up now. It's like, no, you've lost 2 million. It's time to rethink this, and maybe not always, but often. Okay, but what are you really after? I'm really after developing something that's going to change the way that families operate. I'm really after something that's going to, and so I think when we get into perseveration, when we perseverate, it's because we're sticking with a mid-level goal that isn't, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, is the kind of the lay term, right? Or the lay phrase, right? That's like, I got to find what really matters. And I got to find a path that is most likely to help me get there. I'm all for big dreams. I really am. I really am. But one of my dear friends, so Steve Young, is a wonderful quarterback, a Hall of Fame quarterback. And I know Steve, and he's been very nice to me over the years. But I'm actually really good friends with his mom. Her name's Sheu Young. And she and her husband's name is very fittingly Grit Young. They used to tell Steve this growing up. It's wonderful to have a dream, and we will support the dream. And so dreams would be things that, like, by definition, are almost low probability. I want to build the next such and such thing. But they said, we also want you to have a plan. And so Steve, and growing up, I definitely had the dream. I didn't figure out the plan until much later. But which is probably backwards. I mean, and my parents would even probably like, and grandparents might say so. Like, it would have been better to think a little bit more practically early on. But you can do both. So Steve Young, he was like almost won the Heisman Trophy and got drafted into the NFL and made millions of dollars and won the Super Bowl. That is the epitome of pursuing your dream. But he also got his law degree. In the offseason with the 49ers, he would fly home to Provo and take classes for his law degree. And so, I mean, can you imagine being an NFL quarterback playing in NFL playoff games in front of millions of fans and then going and taking your, contract law class or whatever it is. And then when he finished his NFL career, he was like 38 or 39, he went on to have a wonderful career investing and doing things where he relied on not necessarily his sports career, or maybe I'm sure somewhat, he's been a broadcaster and things like that. But he's probably made much more money with the plan, with kind of that the law degree and the doors out that open. And so it's okay to persevere and to do things that people don't think are possible. But don't. Some people disagrry. I've heard some people say burn the boats. I don't know. I think, why do I have to burn the boats? Like, I like the boats. I can still charge the island. I can. Some people have a different mindset, and it works out for them. But I also think some people have that charge the island kind of. Have you heard that thing, burn the boats? Have you heard that?
Yeah.
It doesn't work out, and you see it, and they end up kind of not having options in their life. And so there's nothing preventing you with using all 24 hours in the day, and use that towards things that you feel like, yes, that you love, and go for that, but also I'll be practical. And I think that there's kind of a middle path there to have a fulfilling life. At least that's I'd say my personal philosophy. And I can't take credit for it. I got it from Steve Young's parents, and they've done a nice job with their kids.
Okay, you up for some rapid fire questions?
Yeah.
Okay, most impactful book you've read?
Outside of religious books, it's going to sound cheesy. Think and Grow Rich. That was it. That would change my life.
Okay. What about a habit that's changed your life?
Reading. Absolutely. Reading. That changed my life. Let me just say one I know is rapid fire. The reason why Think and Grow Rich changed my life is precisely because it taught me to do the same thing that you are teaching people to do, which is develop what's called definite chief aim. And you read it to yourself every day. So this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And you get committed to this long. And that I did that. I'm very committed to it and believed it. And even though it's like very not sciencey, like later I learned kind of the science behind the wisdom of that book. Anyway, so reading and that book is particularly influential. Okay, next question.
Amazing. What about a mindset that people need to let go of?
I think it is I'm there's only one way to try that, like trying's enough mindset. What I mean by that is sometimes you need, if you have a growth mindset, you're like, I'm putting in all of this effort and it's going to eventually work one day. It's like, maybe your strategy sucks. And so part of having a growth mindset and something that's another mindset that's useful is something studied by a woman by the name of Patricia Chen, which is called a strategic mindset. And that is, are you asking yourself different ways to do things? It's great that you're trying. I love it. But are you being innovative in your approach? Don't get stuck doing things the same way over and over again.
Okay, so follow-up question. What's a question that people should be asking themselves more often?
How can I do this better? How can I do this differently? Not how can I try harder? We try to white knuckle things too much. What's a better? What Angela says. I love this question. Can you tell Angela's played a big impact in my life?
I love it.
She says she just came out with a book and everyone should buy it. It's called Situated. Her first book was about grit, and now her second book's about your situation. And she says when people say, "What's wrong with me?" This is a poor question because we always come with, "What's wrong with me?" Oh, I lacked motivation. Oh, I was harmed as a child. These things might all be true, but it's not a very useful question. A much better question is, what's wrong with my situation?
Uh,
It's a situational agency.
mm,
And that is, rather than just saying, I'm going to keep my situation the exact same, have the same coworkers, have the same routine, have the same environment, have the same phone that's distracting me all day. How can I change my situation that's going to support me to perform better? Right?
yeah,
What's wrong with my situation? How can I change my situation in a way that's going to build me up rather than suddenly I have to constantly resist?
great. I love that. Okay, what's one thing that creates better relationships?
Listening. I think it's not the only thing. Having pro-social values meant wanting the best for people, being grateful, all those things. But listening for me has been something I had to learn to do better. And often it's hard. It's the hardest to do when it matters the most, right?
Uh,
Both you disagree and like, oh, I really want to say what I have to say. It's like, let me just make sure you feel understood. Once people feel understood, now you can start to rearrange the table and get on the same side. And that's listening is like, it feels like it almost has magic properties. It's like once people feel understood, like it's so easy to work with. It's harder to do though. It's sometimes hard to listen.
it is so hard.
Me who I'm paid to think and write and talk and say what I want. It's like, no, shut up, Danny.
That's great. Okay. If you want the listener to just remember one thing from our conversation today, what's the one takeaway that you want them to walk away with?
Be skeptical of what you can't do. Like what I mean by that is don't just assume that because someone said or because a past experience happened or whatever, that means I'm not capable of something. Be skeptical of that story. There's usually a lot more to it. Is your situation messed up? Did you have the right coach? Did you have the right strategy? What could be different? And don't assume that means someone else just has what it takes and you don't. Question that story and you'll keep your hope alive. And by the way, one more thing. It's not just that you'll keep your hope alive, because that sounds like I'm saying just be positive and just, question what you can't, doubt your doubts. It's like, no, not just that, like literally the limiting belief we tell ourselves, it turns out to not be true. So just don't believe it for the simple fact that science doesn't really support those limiting beliefs that you don't have some innate talent. If we had found that, we would have named it already and we would have done a lot of studies on it. But if you know a lot about this research, we haven't, and we don't have evidence that you can't do it. And so until proven otherwise, go for it.
Amazing. It has been such a joy having you on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us.
You're great, Anne, and hopefully we can stay in touch.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Mpowered Living. I hope today's conversation gave you something meaningful to reflect on and something practical to carry into the way that you lead, love, and live. If you enjoyed the episode, subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who might benefit from the conversation. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.